and go to rule number 16, material equivalence. For short, just simply abbreviated equiv material equivalence. Material equivalence, the nice thing about it is that it's the only rule that we have to deal with a triple bar. So that certainly is good news here. Anytime you see a triple bar and you need to break it down, you can't just simply avoid it as we did in the earlier sections. If you need to break down a triple bar, the only thing that you can do with it is to apply material equivalence. Or, as the case might be, if you need to derive a triple bar, then you know you're going to have to finish that problem off by utilizing material equivalence. So that is quite nice. However, the difficulty in material equivalence is that, as you can tell here in the visual explanation, there are two possibilities. If given a triple bar, we can turn it into one of two different things. So let's suppose that we started with A triple bar B. We could turn that into two horseshoes joined by a dot. We could get A horseshoe B and B horseshoe A, where the antecedent and the consequent are reversed in what becomes the second conjunct. So two horseshoes joined by a dot. So that's one possibility. We can take A triple bar B and convert it into A horseshoe B and B horseshoe A, or again, as indicated by the four dots, vice versa. We could start with this, and if we needed to, finish it off with material equivalence and turn it into a triple bar. The other option at our disposal is that we can turn this triple bar into two dots joined by a wedge. We could alternatively get A and B, or not A and not B, where the wedge becomes the main logical operator. Now the question here, given that you're dealing with the triple bar, is which of these two options are you going to pick? Do you want two horseshoes joined by a dot or two dots joined by a wedge? Well, it depends, quite honestly, on what you need. It depends on the conclusion that you're asked to derive in that particular problem. You've got to here, in deciding which option that you're going to opt in favor of, you've got to try to think a couple of steps ahead. Would it be easier to work with two horseshoes joined by a dot, or would it be easier to deal with two dots joined by a wedge? If you opt in favor of the first option, then this one's going to generally be pretty easy to deal with, in that the main operator becomes the dot. To deal with that dot, then you can simplify. You could even do a common ascent to get the second conjunct by itself. Further, another common possibility here, if you go the direction of this first option, you might be able to set up a constructive dilemma. You've already got two horseshoes joined by a dot, so if you have an antecedent of each joined by a wedge, you might very well pull off a constructive dilemma. If you, however, opt in favor of option number 2, what are you going to be able to do with this? The main operator here is a wedge, and generally speaking, how do we break up wedges? Well, generally you break it up via disjunctive syllogism. So in choosing between the two options, think a couple of moves ahead. If you pick, say, option number 1 and it leads to a dead end, then you know this one didn't work, so it's got to be that one. And fair enough, that's often frustrating. You spent all this time and effort exploring this option, and it leads to a dead end. Frustrating though it might be, you just, again, simply have to regroup and explore the other option. So it goes, so goes life. Think of it as though you're a general, a military leader, leading your troops into battle. You've got this really complicated plan of attack. You know exactly, you think how things are going to play out. But when you actually get out there on the battlefield, much to your surprise, your troops are just simply being slaughtered. So as this military leader, you're now faced with a couple of options. You've got to make a rather difficult decision. You can quite stubbornly adhere to your original plan, even though quite clearly it's not working, or you can decide to call your troops back and regroup. So sometimes these problems might very well lead to a dead end. If you think you've got it all figured out, you've got a nice plan of attack formulated, but unfortunately you discover that it's not working. So at that point you just have to scrap plan number 1, regroup, and formulate a new plan of attack. And so it goes with material equivalence. It's quite nice because if you're dealing with triple bar, there's only one rule at your disposal, but unfortunately there are these two options. So think ahead, think about, if I choose this option, what am I going to do with it? If I choose this option, what ultimately am I going to do with it? Now the majority of the time, you'll pick the two horseshoes joined by a dot, just simply because it's easier to work with. The majority of the time, I don't mean the vast majority of the time. I would say roughly 60-65% of the time, this is going to be the easier option to work with. But that's still a significant portion of the time that you'll need to opt in favor of 2 dots join right away. So those are 3 of our quote-unquote easier rules in 7.4, the last 5, good news, last 5 rules of replacement, leaving us only with 2 more rules in this section before moving on to 7.5 and 7.6.